Now, if you follow my videos, you know I love strategy. So I want to tell you about my Pennsylvania public land hunt for this year. And I'll tell you about the strategy at the end and how it all came together, why I hunted where I did, why I didn't move the second day, and in my history with that area and how that relates to strategy. But I want to tell you about my Pennsylvania buck and the hunt. And it was really exciting. You know, I've done quite a few solo hunts out there. I used to hunt out of a camp. I hunted out of a particular camp for 14 years, I think 13 years, something like that in a row. My first time I hunted out in Pennsylvania was in '93. And I just have a love for the land out there, and it's big hills. Right around here where I live and home, it's 400 to 500 foot changes in elevation, and there's times where it takes us 35 minutes to get into a stand. A lot of people think that's a long ways in, and it is, but compared to out there, opening day was raining. I was supposed to come down, but it rained all the way in, and it was over an hour walk, about an hour and 5-minute walk. I went into that area. It's an area that this is my 16th buck out there I've shot. So I've shot 15 bucks within a mile of that location in all different directions. So I have a lot of special memories going back to '93. And really, you know, this hunt unfolded like a lot of the hunts out there. I like to sit. And out of the camp I used to hunt out of, we shot a lot of bucks. I did. Joe Lasek, a friend of mine, was out there at least 7 years, right around there, and we shot more than our fair share of bucks out of that camp during that time frame. We like to sit, so the guys at camp would make fun of us. They like to walk and still hunt, and we're sitters, and so they'd make fun of us. You know, to hunt is to go out and gather, to move, and I'd argue, you know, if you're a cougar and you're sitting on a ledge and you're watching your prey go by and you pounce on it, that took a lot of strategy to get into that spot. So we go back and forth. Well, I like to sit, and so my plan was to find a spot to sit. I walked about 55 minutes in. I get up to the top. It's uphill the entire way, about 700 foot change in elevation, 600 right around there, way back in. And there's someone sitting in the spot, you know, my option A. And they're sitting there. I could see the orange. And so I backed down the ridge a little bit and cut to the side and went to option B, which he was at about a 3/4 long finger ridge. And I went up into a spot where traditionally I see a lot of deer movement, and but you sometimes see some people walking by and some other hunters. So I didn't mind going up there. I knew we'd see a lot of deer. When I was out last year with Mike Mansell from the Breaking Point, we saw a lot of tracks in this area in the snow. So I knew it's consistent movement. It's been consistent movement to the early '90s, and but it's an area where there's a large saddle on top of the ridge. All the trails come together, and so I sat in that area. My feet got a little cold, and diabetic, they get a little numb sometimes, and I went a half-mile walk one way, came back. I sat in 3 different blind locations, you know, against trees, against a log, throughout the day on opening day, but I moved very slowly. Like if I wanted to go change a spot, I might move 200 yards, but I'm moving to the next tree, stopping, moving to the next tree, stopping, keep my eyes open. And I ended up seeing 16 deer on opening day, which was a really high number for out there, and ended up seeing 2 legal bucks. One I think was a 2-year-old 5-point with no brow tines, and the other one was a 6 or 8-point, and it was a 1.5 year old, a little bit smaller, small little rack, just, you know, might have been 10 inches wide or something, 8 inches, just a little thing. I passed him up. I had the safety off on that 2.5-year-old 5-point. I think, man, I come all this way out here. It's a 14-hour drive, but I just wasn't. I just enjoyed the hunt. I passed him up. After I passed him up, it was great. You know, I didn't regret it. Opening day closed, and what's weird out there is it always opened on a Monday in Pennsylvania, and this year it opened on a Saturday. And then they don't have Sunday hunting. They will next year, but no Sunday hunting. So then I sat back and put a video out, did some work, talked to my wife, you know, relaxed a little bit. I don't get to do that too much during hunting season. And then went out on Monday. I talked to Zach from the Hunting Public. I don't know if you guys follow the Hunting Public, but incredible YouTube channel, incredible group of guys that hunt a lot of public land. But I did a podcast with Zach on Sunday, talked for about 2 hours. We just keep talking, and it's a lot of fun. But I talked about my strategy and going in the next day, and I wanted to go into a particular log and sit against a log that I sat, and I closed out the day on opening day. It was great. You know, in the morning I saw 11 deer, and then I had a hunter walk up to me. And literally he walked right up to me and got to know his name. He's a real nice fella. If you're watching, his name was Dan. He hunted out of Chad's camp. I don't remember the last names, but he was looking for his dad up there. And there's a lot of ridges and a lot of points, and it gets confusing up there. So anyways, we chatted for 5-10 minutes, and I couldn't wait to get back to hunting, and he moved on. And within an hour, it was more like 10 o'clock, I had another fella come up to me, and he actually whistled before he came because he was coming to my back. He saw me sitting, looking. I was against my log, and he walked right up to me. And so we chatted for a bit, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 and he says, "It's got to be my nephews. They shoot a lot when they see a buck." And so he got on the radio. I don't think they hit anything, and he was going over their way, making his way. When he left, I was like, there's been a little commotion around here. I did see 11 deer earlier, all does. So I left and did a little still hunting, and sure enough, that guy's still back in that point. So I stayed way away from him, and I didn't go up and chat with him. Didn't get to meet him or anything. But I came back. I was tired. I actually got out there earlier the second day, so I was in my quote blind against the log at least a half hour before shooting light, 15, 20 minutes. I went back. It was probably about 11:30. Got a really good hour nap in, and I did that on opening day too. You always wonder what walked by, but you know what? I'll never know, so it doesn't really bother me too much. But about 1:30, I'd been awake for about an hour, really looking around. I heard a rush moving behind me, and turned around on that log, and that buck was with some does. The does came in first, but they're moving through fairly quickly. I don't know if he was moving, but he did move to cut them off. And it's a secondary rut. There was an open scrape going in, so which I was really excited. Kind of where that guy was sitting. He was probably probably 3/4 mile from where I was at. A good 12-minute walk maybe. And anyways, I turned over to my left, and those does came through, and he was trying to cut him off on the left side, kind of cut the angle, and you could see him curving around like a buck does, and he was going to move through an opening between the trees, and I maybe 35 yards at the most. I don't think it was 40. Held the crosshairs there, and that's why a lot of times, whether it's with a bow or a rifle, I'm not a fan of the back tension releases, and a lot of times with a rifle, you need to know how to pull the trigger quick, and it's the same with a bow. A lot of times you have a shot that takes place in a second and a half, and you have to get that shot off. You can't rely on just pushing and pulling and waiting for that thing to go off. So I jerked it off, dropped it, hit it in the shoulder, it dropped right down. And you could see in the video me pointing at it, laying over there in the snow. And of course I walked up to it, looked at it, and it was, I saw a nice rack, and it's one of my top 3 bucks, maybe my top 2 out there in Pennsylvania. They're a little smaller. There's not a lot of food. The body weights usually in that camp, they've recorded over 200 deer killed out of that camp. They weighed them all and tried to guess the age. All of them were yearlings, 1.5 olds. Most of them were spikes. They found the 1.5 olds a lot of times were 90 to 100 pounds dressed. 2-year-olds were in that 110, 120 range. The 3-year-olds, 120, 130, and any of the 4-year-olds that they measured, I'm not sure. I think they had one top out at 152 field dress, so a lot smaller. I go out there for the adventure and the love of it. I love that area. I love the hills. I love, rubbing elbows with the Orange Army out there on opening day, the parking spots. It's just the lure of that area is incredible to me. The not being big bucks or big bodied bucks, kind of a plus when you have to get them out. I've had 5-hour drags where literally it was 2 hours uphill, an hour across the flat, and 2 hours down to the truck. And you wear off a 16, 18-inch oval on each side where the hide's completely gone and they're binding up with the leaves. Your legs are buckling on the way down. And that was when I was in my 20s. Now I'm 49. So I pack them out, and I encourage you to too. Just real briefly with packing them out, I've had some people ask me some questions about that. I'll put them on their stomach. I cut to the back of the neck to the tail. I peel off one side of the hide down to the belly. I chunk out the neck roast, the back straps, complete hindquarters, and then you flip and do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you're getting all the chunks of meat and all the good stuff down to the bone. And then you can actually reach in the hindquarters, in between the hindquarters, and you can peel out the inner loins, and you actually never have to gut it. Cut the head off, tag it, and get it out of the woods on the frame pack. So you have complete deboned meat when you're getting it out of there. I would say if you know what you're doing, you're in that 45-minute range to an hour at the most for cutting all that meat off. I throw it on one plastic bag, and then I put the hindquarters back straps into one, and then I put the neck roast and top of the shoulder. I blow out the shoulders a lot, which on this one I did, but I was still able to get meat off the top of the shoulder, even on the bad side and on the back side, to get some shoulder meat out. So I like putting all the shoulder meat, neck meat, any scraps into one bag, and then I put the roast and steaks off the hindquarters and the back straps and tenderloins in another bag. So pretty easy to fit it all. And you know, it feels light when you're picking up that meat in the plastic bag to put in your frame pack. But I can tell you, with a 75 minute walk downhill with a couple breaks, and it's each step as it seems like it's downhill all the way, you feel pretty tired by the time you get back to the truck. So that was my hunt. It was beautiful. Very thankful to have that buck come by. And for me out there, it's a matter of numbers. I told Diane the first day I saw 14 does and fawns and 2 bucks. And those 14 does and fawns, I was actually surprised an older buck didn't go by. This one's 3 or 4. I'm not really sure. He's not 2 and he's not a year and a half old. But I was surprised because when you see 6 or 7 does out there, 8, 9, you know, with a couple groups, 3 groups throughout the day, especially when the opening day is a little bit later in the year. It was actually November 30th. And then the second day when I shot him was December 2nd. So you're getting more in closer to the second rut out there. Usually when you see a group of does, a good group, then you have a chance of seeing a buck. So to me, it was more of a numbers and getting in a spot where you can see those numbers. Sometimes you can pin yourself in a corner where that's cool if they go there, but you're really holding yourself to a small spot in the woods where I was in big movement, saddle movement and bench movement. And so that kind of brings into the strategy. I like to sit again out there. And opening day, it was extremely crunchy. Imagine a 1/4 inch of snow blanketing the top of the leaves and 25 degrees. And there was moisture with that snow. It kind of melted. And so everything was just so incredibly crunchy. On opening morning, I had does coming to me and it was just that they're being cautious. So that step, step, step. I was looking for orange and I was thinking, because we've seen hunters out there with no orange on. So I was thinking, man, I wonder if there's a hunter with no orange on. I can't see anything. But all of a sudden I realized it was deer coming from 300 yards away in the hardwoods. They just sounded so loud. Worst thing you could do is walk around. If you're walking on one side of the hollow, deer are spooking 600 yards away on the other side of the hollow. And a lot of times, unless you stop and listen, you don't even know that there's deer in the area or that they're leaving the area. And so sitting is golden. Now where you sit, I prefer to sit in the big saddle movement at the top of draws. So you have a draw on one side, a draw on the other, maybe several draws. You might be on the head of a finger ridge on a bench system that's going side to side, and then you have a big saddle that goes over the top into a couple other draws. So you might have 4 draws coming up like an X to one saddle, and then you have a bench system on one side. And you know, I will hunt those south-facing bench sides, which this one was, because there's more browse and there's more brush on that south facing, not because they want to bed there. I don't believe that. They'll get out of the wind typically, or they'll go hide. They don't, you know, where they bed has more to do with the habitat type. But I like that thick brush. So I'm on that south facing slope. I'm at an X where all the draws come together up top. And I'm a big major saddle where it drops down at least 50 to 80 feet in elevation from the hump on either side. And I like when the conditions are calm, even if it's a light rain, if it's a light snow, then I love being up in the open like that, because hunters down below, hunters up top, they're going to push deer either on the bench or through those saddles, and I get some major movement all day long, which is what I did, what I was able to get on. I saw 32 deer. Basically, I had a deer come up to me when I was down by my buck, and then I actually saw 3 on the way out, so that'd be 39. They were only about a 1/4 mile from where I was at, which is close out there. So that's a strategy when the conditions are calm. You know, we had light snow the second day, and the rain stopped about an hour into the first day. And so the second day it was rain at first, and then a little bit of snow. You might have had 1 inch or 2 inches by the time the day was over, but fairly calm. Winds were under 10 miles an hour. Now, I made the mistake last year when I went out there. We had heavy rain all day, but fairly calm conditions. It was supposed to turn to snow. So I like hunting down on the hemlocks. I like getting down low. I find that the deer are pushed off the tops when it's windy and there's a lot of snow. And when a lot of snow, I mean 3-4 inches. They'll still cross if people are pushing. But last year on opening day, I don't think there's anybody else in the woods. It didn't feel like that. And we didn't see a deer all day. I went down by the hemlocks, another half hour in that location. So we're talking an hour and 45 minutes in, and not seeing deer all day. Well, we came out early, and there's a glaze of snow up top and lots of fresh tracks. And it was because it wasn't that windy. as it was supposed to be. We didn't have that snow. So even though we had persistent rain all day, those deer were still up on top. Up on top is where they're out in the hardwoods. That's where they're feeding. They're not feeding down those hemlocks. There's no food. So they're up when we have white oaks, red oaks, cherry, beech. It just depends on what they're feeding on at the moment and that particular season. And so you know they're going to be feeding up on those tops somewhere, and if you get into the diversity of habitat, that's going to hold them. So I like being up on top or on the sides where I can see a long ways, sides of a big bowl, big valley. And that's where I've consistently found, or above the hemlock line, just 100 yards, whatever it might be. I like to get into those big bench movement areas that feature saddles around the end of points or benches around the end of points that come together with another point over, you might be 200 yards apart, 300 yards apart from those points. And sitting. If the conditions are really rough and snowy, we find those deer really pile in. I remember seeing, I think it was 5 semi-legal, there was a couple that were legal, bucks in that group down in some hemlocks on a really snowy second day the one year. And so that's kind of the strategy. In my strategy, as far as I look for those conditions, I'm going to be up on top in big movement. But boy, if you're only 20 minutes or a half hour in off the road, you're going to see a lot of hunters. And so once I find that I'm an hour in, a solid 55 minutes to an hour, hour and 5 minutes, 10 minutes plus, then I find that I'm weeding out at least 80% of the hunters. And you might have someone occasionally walking by, but the guy came up and he said, the first guy, he said, man, I've been walking for a long ways. Maybe I should be sitting down, relaxing or something like that. And I'm like, no, you keep walking. It's fun to have people moving deer around. But you have those people moving, and it's not like someone's coming every hour. I saw the guy sitting in the spot that I wanted to sit in, which is crazy because I've never seen people out there like that, sitting. And then I saw those 2 walkers, and that's in 2 full days of hunting and being out in the woods on public land. And it's because you put that distance from the vehicles. And then also, there's a lot of people that hunt down low on the front side. I like finding a spot where you're starting low, and then you're working your way all the way up top. And I use a trail system to get up. It's a hiking trail. And I use that to get up to about the half-hour point, and then I'm going uphill hard for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going across the flat 10, 15 minutes, and then sometimes I go down from there 15 or 20 minutes into other spots, depending on the weather. So strategy, getting into the habitat based on the weather type and the movement. I was also by a scrape line that ran parallel to the ridge system on that bench. So that scrape, I actually pointed out when I'm sitting, it went right in front of me like 25 yards. I had deer move on that. I had deer move through big movement area, through the saddles and across the draws up top. And so I like to be on those scrape lines, not on an individual scrape on the end of a point, because again, you're kind of limiting yourself to just that movement where a buck might come to that little point. I'd rather see that movement all the way around the point on the bottom on the benches and look for that big movement. So I like hunting those long distance scrape lines, the big movement areas, up top, south-facing brushy areas, getting to a spot where I can settle and hunker down. My backside where I'm sitting is usually flanked with a lot of fallen logs and areas the deer can't come through. Like those deer that came from behind me, they had to be 30 yards out to even go by me, and 40 yards somewhere around there. They couldn't get close to me from behind. And then I hunt with my ears a lot. You can hear them coming, getting into position, and I have deer rarely ever see me out there, no matter how close they are. And then you let the weather tell you, do you hunt low down in the hemlocks because it's really bad and windy weather, or do you hunt up top when it's calm conditions? And then lastly, you have to get away from other hunters. You can always shoot a buck 10 minutes from the car, and especially during bow season, early bow season, maybe even during the rut when there's not a lot of people out there. But when you get the Orange Army out there during gun season, I want to be behind 80% of those people. And I like going up, instead of going up a trail all the way to the top where a lot of people will be and joining, like where the kid was looking for his dad. Then I like to go up and then cut up a random point or something and get into an area where it's not in a trail system. I have to work hard to get there. And I find when I do that, I did see the 2 hunters in 2 days, but not too bad. So I had a great time. I love seeing the snow on the way in the mornings that we had. I'd show you some video of the walk-in, walk-out. I think about the only thing I didn't video was the actual shot, but I go in light. I was filming everything with my phone. So I hope you guys enjoyed the hunt, my Pennsylvania hunt this year. I'll be back next year. It's something I look forward to every year, and I don't always make it out there, but I really like going out there. It's it's not booners and big bucks, but it's special bucks to me out in almost mountain country out in Pennsylvania. Like I said, I have that history with the area for a very long time, back to '93. I was 23 years old then, and so even then, that my legs would ache going out in the woods and walking those hills. But it's a special place. Hope you enjoy the strategy of staying high, staying in the food, staying in those major movement areas, maybe finding a scrape line that you can sit and hunker down in good weather, calm weather, and then getting down in the top of the hemlock lines is where I don't like to be necessarily right in the hemlocks. I like to be on where that transition line between hardwood, and so I can look across a nice hemlock flat in those bottoms, and then certainly getting away from people. So it all worked out this year. Usually have some kind of success in the first couple days out there, and this year was no exception, and I was rewarded with a very beautiful buck, and it was certainly worth the 28 hours of travel and the long carry out packed with some really good Pennsylvania deer meat. And I hope you like the entire story of this season.